helps me to forget. Wonder what I'm thinking. Wonder why I'm drinking. But it's plain to see I'm not the man I used to be.
Hello and welcome back to 52 Topics with Frank Fiordolino. Today, we are launching a new series here on 52 Topics called Ridgewood, A True Story. And today you'll be listening to Episode 1. We will still be doing other content, other organized crime, other New York City criminal events, the same thing we've been doing. This will just be a separate series to kind of clearly delineate from things that we talk about on the channel. Frank, what's this going to be all about?
Well, basically, it's about growing up with a lot of the people that you people have read about. I've been asked already if I ever was going to write a book or even proposal for a series, and I said, you know what? I was going to put a proposal for a series and a book, but let me put one together for you guys and see what. Then take that from there and propose it to who I have to propose it to. People have asked me in the past. We never came to terms with things, either the financially or just creative differences. Some people want to go their direction. I wanted to go mine, and I wanted to make it as real as possible, and not like a lot of these other shows. But I'm not going to put them down, but they just come out a little too cartoonish for me. So I wanted to get the real feel of what it was to be. People think, you just go into a movie when you're a kid, you see Goodfellas, you see The Godfather, and then you come out and you're gonna act like that wherever you go. No, there's truths and consequences to those kind of reactions, and this is where I start with this, and it's a coming of age into that kind of life, that we were looking to get into. And this is where I start, where things begin to get a little bit serious, and I'll introduce you to the characters, introduce you to the characters. They're real people, and we're gonna take it from there.
So without further ado, let's get to Episode 1 of Ridgewood, A True Story. Italia 90. Frank, before we get to the streets, what's going on with the World Cup in 1990? Where's it heading?
In Italy. So that's how the place got its name, but it had nothing to do with soccer at all. What most of my friends, soccer fans, I'd say they were up to a fault. A lot of them were soccer, baseball, American football, but soccer was especially the national team. And every 4 years we had the World Cup, and that year was in Italy. So my brother had a chance to buy a little place, real small place on St. Nicholas Avenue on the border of the Bushwick Ridgewood area. And there was a guy who owned the property. His name was Bastiano. We call it Bastiano. Good guy, really good guy, Conigliaro. And he owned that property. And my brother had gone to him and says, hey, look, I want to put some machines there. You have some, and when I talk about machines, Joker poker machines at the time were very, very sought out. People like to gamble. This is, for those people who had the bug, who liked those machines. It was video poker. It was based on poker. Instead of driving to Atlantic City, they could go to these places and gamble. So this was a nice spot for that. And with that intention, my brother had a coffee shop already on Knickerbocker, him and my other brother, my brother Phil. So he decided to buy this place or rent this place out. And within a year, it was going to be like more than he can handle for sure. Well, it was more than a spot for Joker poker. It had a coffee machine, little bar, small place, very small. And even the machines where they were, I believe there was 2 Joker poker machines in the back, and they were together. And then there was an entrance where you could hang out, chill out. We had a little jukebox and a bar. But we were in me and my friends were hanging out in a place. I was working at that last episode. You remember us following that Nino's Cafe?
Yep.
So check that one out. So we were in the cusp, not in the middle of not having a place. So that place came in the right time. And the other Giannini Cafe, the one that the pre-Giannini Cafe, which actually became Casablanca, Joe Messino's place, was not doing well, and they were looking for a home. So we were in the middle of that, and we decided to take go hang out at my brother's place. And what made this place different was that my brother Phil allowed my younger friends, the girls, to come there. And when I mean younger, over 18, but our group, where the cafes were not girl friendly, if you will. So they started hanging out there. They were over 18, 19 years old. It wasn't like they were, and being who he was, he liked that, didn't mind that, and they would come out. So there was a very pretty girl. We had a lot of these good looking kids coming to hang out, and we had there was this bigger girl. We would just call her Big Michelle. She used to hang out, and she was loud as fuck. And I remember well because she looked like she was a fucking gang leader to this girl. A little bit older, but she'd hang out too. So it was a pretty cozy place. And then with that, my friends started coming. Let me introduce you to my friend. So there was Ralphie. We talk about Ralphie Schuler, right? There was Paul. We know Paul.
Paul Ragusa, yeah.
Yeah. There was this fucking Joey Ferragamo used to hang out with from the Mob Wives. He used to hang out with Ralphie a lot. And they would steal cars and then come there at nighttime and just like me, Ralphie and Paul, we would hang out a lot back then. Whatever was coming, if we had something to do, whatever, we know each other a long time. It wasn't before the animosity grew between us, but between me, Paul, and Ralph, and other people that come in mind. But we're early for that. There was older Ridgewood guys that hung out there. Now there was Alex, Black Alex. We'll talk about him. The kid Kenny, this guy Kenny. He looked like Vanilla Ice and a little bit of Paul Newman, shady character. There was Mike Nigliaro, who was our bartender. Mike was the owner of the building's son. He was the bartender there. And somebody I grew up with and went to school with. There was a kid I grew up with too. Pops. He was a Puerto Rican kid. Italian Puerto Rican, really good kid, and he used to come down. There was Joe DeLeo, and you'll meet him. My good friend growing up, Nat, and another bartender who becomes believe it or not, a soldier in the Banana family. His name was Enzo, which I don't meet until a sit down years later, which is weird because somebody recommended. My brother gave him a job. Good guy. So these are the people hanging out there, and then with our group. There was a little bit older group. We mentioned Kenny, Alex, Bobby Wiziak. There was this kid. They were a little bit, and then there was a younger group. And this was like Anthony Tabita. We'll talk about him. He had a little younger group. He had this Anthony Siaka kid, this good goalie. There's John Gennaro kid who hung out with them. And this kid, Ricardo. So they were a little bit younger. They were starting to come around. And this is important that I introduce you to these characters because they all come together later on as we get older. But during this time, this was a trying time for us. This place was it was pretty rocking. We were friends with the Woodhaven kids at this point, the Antonucci's. They would come down, they would bring their friends down. This place, look, if you can get 40 people there tight. At times we had like people outside, people in there, always hanging out. The girls were always there. So it was becoming a popular place for the wrong reasons. And always on a good night, we had a bunch of fun. I mean, we had kids. Let's say somebody got in trouble in the nightclub and we drove up there. We went there 30, 40 tap. It was just that place. At that time, though, the club stuff was dying out, the club fights, because we were getting a little too old for that. But at the same time, we were becoming something more like talked about, that the older guys that were trying to make a name for themselves probably felt a little threatened and at the same time a little perturbed. You understand?
Yeah, I get it. Let me ask you something about your brother opening that spot. So, I mean, I live in New York City. I live in Queens, but obviously it's a different time. But a new coffee shop opens up in my neighborhood. I see it and I say, oh, I got to step in there next week, see what it's all about. A place like that opens up in that neighborhood back then. Is it as an inviting of a place for just the regular schmo walking down the block? or is it kind of like a thing where, that's probably like some fucking wise guy spot?
Yeah, but it's kind of like a wise guy spot, but not that social club where people like just go in there, play their cards, mind their business. We were a little bit out there. We were in a
Okay.
neighborhood where a lot of other stuff was going out at the time. So, we're talking about we're in Bushwick technically. So they had other fucking, like, I use this term a lot, of fish to fry the cops. So we weren't. Was it rare having a bunch of these white kids there in that neighborhood? Yeah, I mean, the whole place started on a bad note anyway. There was these two kids who lived upstairs from the house, and they figured since we always hung out there, and if they got in trouble, they could run in there and we'd be helping them because they've been having problems with the Spanish kids for a long time, and they lived there, always getting themselves in trouble. They were two twins. So one day, my brother's in there alone, and they run right into his fucking place, and they won't come out, and they just decide, the Spanish kids, to break every window in the fucking place.
Jeez.
Yeah, and this is like a week, 2 weeks into it, and he'd gotten pissed. He had his brother-in-law at the time, this Colombian guy named George, and another guy he'd hang out with, the Salmontana from and he said, "Come on, let's go look for these motherfuckers." I think they ran into them, and something on the door with they threw shots at each other, and the kid's father came with the kid and said, "Look, my son, he just brought the kids there to break your window. He had done well, your son's gonna pay for them fucking windows." And so are they upstairs, and that's what ended up happening. But they did threaten the cops too. I mean, they broke the windows and then they threatened the cops. So the place was fucking down for already for a fucking black guy, And not only that, you had these kids who were friends with Tabita as well. They had they were still going to school. Some of them had gotten thrown out. They were like the Grover Cleveland kids. So
Right.
they have gotten in trouble with kids from that neighborhood for a while now, since like freshman year. They would get along, and then they would fight again and get along. So it was always if I found you with more friends of mine, or they found you with something would clash. So they were still in that mentality, not into making money, but just to fucking proving themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
No, I definitely know, just from growing up, hanging out on the streets, and I definitely know what it feels like to have the younger kids or a different group of kids fuck up a good thing. I mean, for
right,
sure.
and they were the younger kids. When I say that, compared to us, we were in the middle, and then you had the older kids, like I told you, Bobby. You had this kid Artie, Robbie. They're all about. They're older than us. And when we talk about the Ridgewood boys and the Ridgewood juniors, but we're not juniors, no, we're just guys right now hanging out. And then you had these kids growing up. And then there was Paul's nephew who had his own clique, but he was too young to come in there too. He was probably like 16 at the time. So he had his little clique, and they weren't of age yet to come in. They come in a little bit later. They come to their own, getting enough trouble as all. So you got this kid Fabio, you got this kid Anthony Pipito, who's Anthony Pipto, you heard about him. You have Joe Shalara, who's Sal Catalano's nephew, and this kid John Clemenza, and they got their own little clique among all of us. But we're all the same, but just different cliques. So you get it?
Yeah, yeah, and they're younger, but I mean, all these
But
guys
as
would have.
soon as they get older and start doing things that we kind of get into, um, we start I don't know. Fucking, but for the less of the words, we start accepting each other. The ones who can do this, the ones that are just gonna go to work all their life, or the ones who just get a girlfriend, you'll never see them again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
My clique was against my uncle Cheech, my brother Phil, my brother Joe. My brother's best friend was Jesse James. They end up getting in trouble later on, getting in a big indictment. There's Joe Bosco, the plumber, who hangs out at and there's Mikey Boots. We'll get into him too. And they're all in my older group. We all have these older groups, all these older people that at the end of the day we have to answer to. Like Paul didn't answer to nobody. He didn't give a fuck. He just didn't care. Where his nephew answered to Patsy Conti, So that was his thing. But Paul, at the end of the day, beat at his own drum. I think we talked about this already. He
So
just
Paul Ragusa, right? But his nephew Fabio Bartolotta, you're saying he answered to Patsy Conti?
to say he would go to their meetings every Tuesday where they would meet up, and in that clique there was Joe DeLeo. Trying to think about who else was in that clique right now offhand. I just doesn't come to like them two right now because them two come in my mind. And there was an older guy that they used to fuck with too, named Enzo Polaro, who was like the go-between at the time between Conti and them. And we'll talk about Enzo Polaro too. This is the beginning, and we all are hanging out in these places. Like I said, the coffee shop is ready to close. The one on Nino's that was once Tony Aiello's that I discussed in the last episode, and everybody starts congregating in this place. And to say the least, the place was always it was an interesting place. Our first incident, I guess, is with one night Kenny, the guy who looks like Vanilla Ice, comes back, and we're playing. He starts hanging out with the bartender kid, Mike, the Canigliaro kid, really nice kid. I think he straightened his life. It was never bad anyway, but he's doing very good things. The last time I heard, in government, and not in the government, but in politics rather. Sorry about that. And we were hanging out, and he comes around, the kid, the Vanilla Ice kid, Kenny. I don't know. They must have been drinking, and they start fucking getting into me about something. And Kenny's a couple of years older than me, and I didn't think nothing of it. I liked Kenny. He was a character. He sold drugs in the bars. We all knew that. He did his 50 pieces or whatever. I think he had gotten it into before that with Vito at one time where he got sliced up for being at the wrong place. Because, what was going on in these neighborhoods, Glendale, Ridgewood, Maspeth, Middle Village, these guys would try to sell drugs in these bars, but then they would find out that some other person would have a piece of those bars, and then they would be told not to come around, or they have to kick up. And then when there was discrepancies, you'd have either they get fucked up, stabbed up, whatever. So Kenny, rumorville had it that he had gotten stabbed at one point by Vito. I don't know. And that was one on the ridge. That happened before. So he was a little mouthy, but he was funny mouthy. And they were going on, and they were going on, and it was going over my head. I don't know what happened. And Alex comes in, Black Alex. He comes into the Italian 90. He goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Why is this fucking guy talking that shit?" I said, "I don't know. I don't think he was talking anything, to be honest with you." And he goes, "Come on, I got to talk to you outside." So the word on the street at the time was that Kenny might have been starting to talk to the cops, because he came out of nowhere with a fucking AMG Mercedes, a white one, expensive. He was coming with this money. He was asking people all around about certain deals he was looking to make, and he would go to Florida for 2 weeks and not come back. So people were edgy. The older guys were. So when he goes outside with him, he just manhandles him, fucking takes him, beats his ass, and I'm out there, and he starts fucking like pounding his head on the concrete and goes, "Oh, come on, motherfucker." He's getting like urban with him, but he can't do nothing because Alex was a strong fucking kid, but not a real fight at the time. Surprised the shit out of me. And he just fucking, there was blood going from his nose, from his eyes, boom. And he goes, "Oh yeah, this ain't over. I got this tomorrow. Fuck you. We'll talk about it tomorrow." He goes. So he just leaves. I said, "What was that about?" I don't know what the fuck was going on. I didn't think it was that serious, me and him getting into it, but Alex was always protective anyhow. So he just walked in and he goes, "Fuck that guy. He's a piece of shit. But don't let him come here no more." I said, "Oh, whatever." And I was young. And I did, obviously, it got smoothed over one way or the other, but there was animosity. Next day, you seen fucking Kenny. He was all fucking bruised and shit. But that's the type of stuff that was going on at the time. And there was a lot of incidents. We used to go to the clubs and then come thereafter. My brother never used to like me being there because, of course, the fucking scumbag that he was, he'd had to talk to the girls and didn't want me to do it. He was only been married 2 years at the time. So he didn't want me there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was
Two
like, "Hey,
questions before.
Sure.
Two questions before we move forward.
Sure.
One, as far as your brother goes, what is his standing in organized crime?
My brother at the time,
Yep.
my brother's an associate at the time.
Okay. So his
Fine,
guy
go
was
that
your
way.
Uncle Cheech.
Yeah, that we talked about. So that was his machines in there. His sons, Phil and Anthony, used to come and get the money from the machines back then.
Black Alex. Who is that?
All right, so Black Alex is Dominican. His name is Alex, and we grew up with Alex. Alex grew up around that area, St. Nicholas area, the St. Bridget area, with the St. Bridget Church area, and he was good friends with the kids, the Sicilian kids from Palermo. You know, that's the side of they were. He even talked with a Palermo Sicilian accent, which people would be astonished. Well, also very intelligent, very smart. He later gets in trouble in the following years, but we're going to get into that. And he's around a lot of big time guys, big time people, and he gets a lot of respect from these people all the way in Sicily. So he's friends with within the Sicilian community for sure, and trusted as well.
Okay, so he's a Dominican kid who just happened to grow up amongst a bunch of Sicilians, ended up speaking
Yes,
Sicilian, and then ended up
very well.
essentially doing business with them, friends basically.
Yeah, part of the family for sure. My family
Family.
loved him. Other family, he was closer to Paul's family,
Uh huh.
but also close to the Sicilian people. He was us. When we looked at him, we didn't look at as a black person. You know, that was Alex. We introduced you to Mike, the bartender at the place. Joe DeLeo would come in there a lot. He's somebody I grew up with. Was also in that Enzo Polaro, Joe DeLeo, Fabio with the Patsy Conti book, and that was their rabbi. You know, and eventually not for a second, but and then they had our friends that didn't care. We got involved with everything we had to do. There was Paul, there was me, there was Ralph, there was a redheaded kid named Willie I grew up with. Really didn't get into the trouble that we did, but hung out with us. You know, I'm also naming kids that hung out. We're not necessarily in the criminal aspect either. You know, there was this kid Alberto, um, who used to come and watch the games, did well in life, went to work, became who he was. And then there was the ones who got in trouble and then became good as well. You know, the junior crew at the time, we would call them the junior crew at the time because they were coming to age. There was Tabita, this Gennaro guy who used to come around that I wasn't crazy about. Ricardo, Shiaka, they were always together. So that was, and then there was my brother and his kumbade, best guy, Jesse James, that they would hang out a lot. When we got in trouble, it seemed like these guys would take over. And my brother's brother-in-law, George, he's a Colombian guy. That if we ever got in trouble, he always had a fucking handle on him, a couple of guns, and he was ready for action. You know, so that's where we were at the time. You got to remember, we in 1989, really all the older people that were worth shit weren't around anymore. So we basically we're either figuring it out. Either we start defending ourselves because the people we even go to are not going to do it for us. So we got to do a lot of things on the sneak or whatever it is. We get in trouble with wise guys' kids or whatever. We got to play stupid and then go on the attack because they're just going to fucking think that because they're their father who they are. So that gradually comes about too. So we learn that. We adapt to that. So we be talking about that. But this episode, that's it. We just talked about it. This is the first one of many. And the repercussions. There's going to be some repercussions to the Kenny deal. And there's going to be other situations to the Italia 90.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have like three tiers of like age groups. You have you guys are in the middle. Then you have like your brother and his friends, and then you have like you said, the Anthony Chabitas, the Bartolottas that are below you. So it's interesting to me in that sense where you guys, and then ultimately, you know, you say you guys, you and the guys that are a few years younger than you, you guys ultimately team up and you're on the same side. Kind of harkens back to, it makes me think of like what you were saying with a lot of the former Gotti loyalists kind of making their way over to like your group of friends and you guys bonding over a certain type of thing. So yeah, but eventually you guys are all going to team up, and that's essentially the premise of this little series, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we all end up eventually. This place is going to close down in a year, but before it does, a couple of incidents happen there, and one of them is an incident where one of the girls starts bringing around a couple of juniors friends there, and they get into it with one of my friends, and they come back to make it seem they came in like they were the best guys. Then they did like the best guys around. You like that? And then they start
Yeah, yeah.
making moves. And at the time that was going on, a lot of the kids from that neighborhood, Haven, Ozone Park, were gravitating to hanging out with us. And it was friendships that they were starting to make and made that were lifelong friendships. And they could relate to that, being on Woodhaven and saying, yeah, these motherfuckers been doing that shit forever. They came down here, they want to talk whoever the fuck they want. First they act like they're friendly, and then they want to come back and fuck somebody up. So that shit was getting old. So that's kind of like a moment in time where all that resentment starts with juniors people. You understand?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it speaks to like feeling I guess emboldened or privileged in a sense where it's like you would have a Howard Beach guy even come to like the Ridgewood or Bushwick border and try to cause trouble because you know how New York City is. I mean, 3 neighborhoods over, it's a different world, right? So I
Right.
mean that speaks to where someone's head is at, entitlement or whatever you want to call it.
And we're going to bring a certain individual that starts, coming around. He's borrowing his father's car. He's like 27. He has a cigar out his mouth. And that's Frank Radici. He starts coming into the place with John Ruggiero, the son, and talking about the mob and Junior and I, we're doing this and that, like the side of his mouth to make it's like an intimidating thing. So they come for money anyway. They're driving with these high-end cars and trying to intimidate. And then there's an incident that comes about that, and that starts moving the chains in the resentment line. Eventually, if you're junior, you're saying, wow, these kids go out, they're doing this, that, and everything. And I'm okay with it. But one day it's going to fall back on me. And it is today, if you notice it. A lot of these people don't like him because of his friends. So we're going to take that from there.
All right, man. Yeah, people are really going to enjoy this. I'm glad that we could figure something out to, like I said, delineate from the other content, And once again, as we mentioned in our live streams, all of the Ridgewood people coming in, people that want to hear this Ridgewood history, maybe people that Frank knew when he was younger that are coming. Please, like, tell your friends, tell anybody who you think might be interested in this to come on over, hang out with the live streams, check out the content, and that's what we're kind of trying to do, Frank. We're trying to like permeate in a different kind of way. Of course, organized crime, but we really want to get neighborhood people on board with this channel.
Okay, so see you next week.